I was born in 1960. I started going as a very young child in the 60s to my grandparents' home. They lived in Paris. And for me, my grandfather, who I always spoke to in French because he didn't speak English, was a Frenchman. And as I got older, probably in my teenage years, I learned that there was a past that he hadn't talked so much about, that in fact he'd come from Vienna. And then as I got even older, I learned that there was a period before Vienna, that he'd in fact been born in a place called Lemberg in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and that he'd spoken Polish there. All of this was news to me. He never talked to me about that period. In 2010, I received this invitation from the University of Lviv in the Ukraine to give a lecture on my work on crimes against humanity and genocide. I didn't really know where Lviv was. I hadn't made the connection with the city of Lemberg, where my grandfather Leon was born. But the moment that I realized that Lemberg, Lviv, Lvov, Leopolis were all the same place, all the same city, I decided that I would go. Walking the streets of Lviv today, I often imagine my grandfather as a small boy in that city. I found the house where he was born. And I've often asked myself what his feelings towards the city were. And I don't have an answer to that because I never asked him, because we grew up in a family of silences about that painful past. And so I really don't know what he felt about that period. My sense, but it's only an instinct, was that he had a very happy childhood. And he came, as I learned from my researchers in writing this book, from a huge family. I knew him as a solitary man. And so I suspect by the end of his life, looking back, Lemberg, Lviv, was a place of sadness for him because it was a place of loss. So I work as an international lawyer. I'm professor in that field at the University of London, and I work as a barrister, so I'm an advocate, and I'm very often in Holland. I do most of my cases in The Hague, at the International Court of Justice or at the International Criminal Court. And international justice is my field. I went to Lviv for the first time in the autumn of 2010, and I felt completely comfortable there straight away. It felt like a sort of coming home. I loved the buildings, I loved the streets, and notwithstanding the bloody history of the city, I liked the food, I liked the coffee, I liked the feel of the place. And as I got to know the place better, and as I came to understand it was a place of origin for the concepts of crimes against humanity and genocide, I felt there was a connection between that city and the city of The Hague, because they are the two places in my life that I most associate in a geographic sense, physical sense, with international crimes and their legal element. When I was about 18 or 19 and I went off to university, I started off doing economics, and I decided I wanted to change. And one of the people who encouraged me to change to law was my grandfather, Leon. At the time, I didn't really understand why. I didn't know so much about the details of his background. As I went through my law studies, did a master's, and headed towards international law, one day he sent me an English-French dictionary in the field of law and inscribed it and expressed his happiness that I'd followed this path. And I think now, looking back, I mean, it was 40 years ago, I think he was expressing his happiness that I'd taken a path perhaps that would allow to be put in place, or me to be involved in the putting in place of rules and the enforcement of rules that concerned the terrible things that had happened to his family. He welcomed my direction. He encouraged me to go into international law.